All right, no more dirty jokes, everyone. That's the first one. That's the first thing that someone will see when they hop on is no more dirty jokes. So they'll only assume that we're telling dirty jokes.
I got you. I think we lost Raleigh.
I think we lost Raleigh.
So I was.
He probably, like left when he heard me make that joke.
Yeah, like he might be back up.
Yeah. So with this one, guys, we're doing something a little bit different than what we did last time. This is going to be more interactive, and I was hoping that we would have more people. Everyone here seems to be okay with being on video. Raleigh's back.
Hey, by the way, Raleigh, nice to meet you. You're on the West Coast, right?
That's right. I'm in Orange County, and it's great to meet you all too. I just had some trouble with my headphones. Had to rejoin.
I think we all did here. I think Keegan and I were talking about that too before everybody started popping up. Yeah, so I got to say, I'm jealous of your daylight because it's dusky out there.
The West great too.
Good morning.
Raleigh, we're glad you could be here. You added some great interaction and great questions last time to kind of keep things moving. So we may end up with a shorter meeting tonight, not having so many people, but we'll see how it goes. And so I think the purpose was to talk about tools that we would use on a daily basis in an admin role or Salesforce role. And it can be tools within Salesforce or tools that works in conjunction with Salesforce. And I think what we're kind of trying to achieve is those of us who are maybe looking to break into our first role or whatnot, maybe what kind of tools should we focus on, spend time, everybody has limited time. So if we're trying to study for exams and whatnot, are there other things we should be devoting some of our attention to, maybe to build our resume and also to prepare for what's coming in our first admin role? So, a few of the things that we had, I think, on a discussion was Jira and Excel. So what are you guys, Rosie, Christine, you guys are already working, I think, in the ecosystem. Do you use things like Jira frequently for your projects?
I do not. And I guess I'm from a little bit of a different background in that I'm a project manager actually by trade. And just kind of, I think this is common, accidentally became a Salesforce admin, and I'm very new at it and still learning. But to your point, since I do have a project management background, I have a very strong scheduling background. And one of the things that we've added, one of the apps that we've added to our Salesforce to keep everything together for customer projects is Inspire Planner, which is a project management software from AppExchange that you can actually add on to Salesforce. We're using it more for customer onboarding purposes than perhaps an admin tool, but it has a very good scheduling feature to it that could be either waterfall or agile.
And what was the name of that again, Christine?
Inspire Planner.
Okay, so it's actually a Salesforce feature that I guess like you'd have to have another license or something for that, probably.
Yeah, it's a separate. I mean, it's a separate company. You buy it on the AppExchange. It's a managed package that gets added on to Salesforce. But what's nice about it is it has, like I said, it has the scheduling features, but it actually integrates with a lot of the Salesforce objects quite well. So if you've built a schedule, any of the rows within that schedule, once you assign it, will actually become a Salesforce task and be added to a user's Salesforce task list. So that's really nice. And obviously then it integrates with the accounts and contacts, so you have all that information right there in one spot and don't have to worry about if you are using Salesforce as your CRM and you've gotten a new customer, you don't have to you don't have to migrate all that information into another tool. It's really all right there.
Oh, that's very interesting. I've downloaded Jira, just trying to spend a little time learning that. Nice that there's another option there from the App Exchange that might be useful for the same purpose.
It is licensed separately, so it's not cheap, but it made sense to us as a company to go to that for onboarding purposes.
Inspire Planner will not be the same thing as Jira. They're two different tools.
Right.
So like Jira would be for like tickets, whereas that's what she's talking about is more customer facing. But at my org, we don't use Jira for our team. We're a software company, so the software side actually uses Jira, but we don't. My senior admin actually built an app inside of Salesforce to handle our tickets, which is fantastic. I like having it just native, like inside of Salesforce. Like we have a global action where people can just, click the plus sign that says ask an admin, and they can click that, and then they can fill out a little, like something's not working right, or I want something enhanced, and they give us a little description, and they can upload, screenshots or whatever, and then it creates a record in the app for us, and then I can assign it to people, assign effort levels, all that fun stuff. And that's where we keep our backlog of everything we need to address. So that's how we handle that particular thing. So that's all native, but apps that I find super useful as an admin on a daily basis, there's several. Salesforce Inspector is a Chrome extension. That is fantastic. Like I use that every single day, every single day. It's called Salesforce Inspector. It's a Google Chrome extension.
I saw something about that and even went and looked at it once. Tell us a little bit, if you would, what you can do with Salesforce Inspector.
Sure. So you can log in as another user straight from the little pop-up tool that it gives you. So you can do that in Salesforce. You have to go to users, and then you have to go, to their user record, and then hit login as. This, like, say you're on a page and you're like, I wonder what this page looks like to, the VP of sales. You can just pick his user and click it right there on that page, and then just look at it as him right there, and not have to navigate away or open another tab or whatever. So it's really time saving. Another thing it does is it shows you all of the fields that are on that page, whether they're on the page layout or not. So like, for example, for us, we have like 8 different page layouts for opportunities. And maybe you're on a page and you're like, oh, I need to know what this value is, but it's not on this layout. Well, instead of having to go and find a user and logging in as that, or try to query it, you can just use Salesforce Inspector and just look at all the values, and it pulls it all for you, and like just a really simple little format, so you can see things that are missing off the page pretty easily. You can also do, I think, data import and export. I don't usually use it for that, but you can.
Nice.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I use it every single day. I think it's like, if I had to pick one thing, it would probably be that I would that I would keep. And then Workbench is something I use a lot for data import and export. That's a free tool as well. It's going to depend a lot on your org, how they handle data and data coming in, data going out. But for us, we occasionally, and you will probably have to do this, push CSV files with data. Maybe somebody went to like a trade show or whatever and got all this contact information in an Excel sheet somewhere from scanning, the badges and stuff, and they bring it and they want it uploaded, to the leads in your Salesforce org, and then add it to a campaign or something. So you're going to have to import that data. And while there's native things like, data import wizard, data loader, like those kinds of things, I find Workbench should be like more straightforward. And if you know SQL, it'll do SQL queries too. I'm not super familiar, but my senior admin is, and he uses it for that all the time. I mainly use it for updating records, upserts, deletes, when you're trying to do something in bulk, especially if it's something that's not in data import wizard. So like for opportunities, for example, you can't upload opportunities from data import wizard inside of Salesforce. So you'll have to use data loader, but I prefer Workbench to data loader if I can help it.
Are there
in talking,
many limitations as far as what you can upload and import rather? from with
We're doing some
Workbench
limitations
opposed
too.
to the import wizard and whatnot. But so you have more free range to do him with the
Mhm.
Workbench.
Basically, if it's in the database, you can pretty much do it. David, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, and I remember talking to Tony about Workbench. He said he's sorry he can't be here tonight. He missed everybody, but he got stuff going on today.
Okay.
I remember him telling me that Workbench is actually it's built by somebody at Salesforce,
Oh.
and it's but it's not officially Salesforce sanctioned apparently. And so he said I don't know why, because it does everything you want it to do. You tell it to do something and it does it because it just makes so much sense. He said, I think it's just a matter of time. I love it, but it's not official. You know?
Yeah, there's a lot that isn't. I mean, like using what's built in is great, but there are some things that just aren't built in that would be nice to have. But I think a lot of those people, like they do those things. Like Workbench has been around a while, and they get hired by Salesforce after they build it because they're like, hey, look at this guy. You know, so that happens sometimes.
Right.
Another tool I would mention that I've just recently started using based on like the work I'm doing is called HappySoup.io. So happysoup.io. Yeah.
It sounds like one of the little phone games you play. I remember there was one called like Paper.io. Sorry, it just made me think of it.
Paper.io. Yeah, it's kind of I mean, like it's like one of those apps, but the guy who built it, similar story in that he used to work for Salesforce. I don't know if he built it before he worked there or after he worked there. I don't think he works there anymore. I think he works for a partner organization now, but he just built it on his own time because he wanted it. It's free. But what it does is it helps you check for metadata dependencies in your org and making sure when you go to change something that you're not going to break it. So that is a big deal for me right now because we're making a lot of changes in our org to a lot of fields, and I'm always obsessively worried that I'm going to break some kind of link to something. There's a button, you know, that says where is this used in Salesforce, which is nice, like on certain fields, so you can see that, but it doesn't pull in certain things. Like you can't see if something's being used by a workflow rule, for example, or if you use like, for example, other things like flows and validation rules and stuff, it can check those too and just see like what is utilizing this. So that way, you know, if you delete it or change it or whatever, that it's potentially going to break something somewhere else.
I really like the sound of that because that would be me too. I'd be second guessing every decision, going, I'm going to screw it up. I just know I'm going to screw it. And so it makes me think of my very limited experience with Python and working with friends that they had run tests and it would literally highlight like here's some areas that may not work or it just flat out doesn't work. It had like color code. Red was broken and yellow was this could cause problems. Do you need to do this? You know? I really like the sound of that.
It's very convenient. Like I said, it's free. And it does a lot like if you're a developer, which I'm not, but if you're ever interested in going in that route, it's got a lot for developers in it too, with that kind of stuff where you're checking on dependencies, like with Apex classes and that kind of thing. But another thing I forgot to mention too, which I really love, I've discovered that's so much better than the where is this used button, is like where is this used will tell you if something is used in a flow. But like if you have like 8 versions of that flow, because you've, you know, updated it a bunch of times, it just shows you all 8. And you're like, which one is the active one? It's usually the bottom one, but you still have to like click and then you realize it's not right. The Happy Soup one will actually tell you which flow is active and how it's triggered inside of it. So that's another nice thing about it.
Well, and there's always the potential of someone going back and activating a previous version. So yeah, I mean, that sounds really helpful. Did you say that that's on the App Exchange?
No, just go to happysoup.io on just Google it and you'll find it.
Okay, cool.
The way a lot of these work is like you log into your Salesforce org. There'll be like a Salesforce login page and it'll ask you for your username and password for whatever org it is you're trying to log in through. It uses Heroku. And then you log in and you can have access to your org straight from the web. So you don't need an app or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So that one's a good one. I'm trying to think of any others that I use regularly. Those are like the top 3 for me.
There's one that keeps coming up that I don't know why it makes me nervous because from my background, I feel like I don't really use it. And when I myself, I think I use different forms of it, but it's Excel. And I've seen that in other conversations. I know you brought it up one time, Rosie, on Slack, and I think Matthew said it, Tony said it. There's all different versions. There's the, what do they call it? Data something in Salesforce. It's their Excel version. And I'm like, I don't know anything about Excel. I am not an office person in any sense of the form, right? And so I'm like, where have I ever used any kind of spreadsheet? And I thought, think about it. I do have spreadsheet knowledge in keeping track of logs and load counts and things of that nature. So like I know more than I give myself credit for. But Excel is one of those things where it's a big animal, and it's still out there and very present. And it's like, should I go to a course on Excel just on its own? Would that be something that background in office and projects, say yes, go pursue Excel in line with your Salesforce?
I do frequently use Excel,
but
I think the main advantage is just going to be, I guess, if you're importing, exporting data and you have to have it in a CSV or flat file, Excel is a place you can work with it after you export it. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely.
You will do it. It's just a question of how often you have to use it. And it doesn't have to be Excel. You can use Google Sheets or something similar. But yes, it will. Unless you're a BA or someone who's actually like not working in the org itself. Like if you're, like say for example, if you're an admin, you're going to do it for sure. If you're a consultant, you might not, I guess, depending on your role, but if you're doing anything to do with implementation, at some point, the customer's data is going to have to go into the org, right? And so sometimes they can do that, through, it depends on like the size of the customer and what their database was before and all that kind of stuff. Other people, maybe they were keeping everything on Excel sheets and they're a smaller business and now they're trying to get, a CRM going. So you're going to have to import that data. But I think, yeah, spreadsheet knowledge is super, super important. There's a good Salesforce Ben article. I wish I had the link to it. I'll look it up for you. But basically, like, here's some Excel functions that are super useful for any admin to know. And it's a nice like little cheat sheet list of like, these are like the top ones. VLOOKUP is one of the very big ones that we use a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just pivot tables?
You could use pivot tables for some things. VLOOKUP is important because a lot of times people will give you like a spreadsheet with a bunch of like, here's all these names of users and we want you to update their, like maybe it's a title or a reporting division or something, but they don't give you the ID. And so you have your Salesforce ID to be able to get to the record and be accurate, especially if you have a big org, about like 3 John Smiths or whatever, and like you have to like figure out who's who. And so you can actually compare, like say you have you pull a report in Salesforce, or you can use Workbench to do it, and you get all those IDs with names, and then you've got your other spreadsheet over here that's got some names in it and a bunch of other junk, and you can use VLOOKUP to like basically smash them together and get your IDs next to the names so that it's all lined up correctly, and then you can do your import. Yeah.
Now, Christine, with you being more on the project management side, do you see yourself using Excel a lot, or do you like tend to lean more towards those project management specific apps?
It depends on what I'm doing, really. If I'm scheduling, I want to use some sort of a scheduling app. But if I need to communicate that schedule to a customer, to somebody else, nobody likes looking at Gantt charts except me, apparently. So sometimes, and most of those products will export to either a CSV or Excel, where you can put it and clean it up and put it in and basically streamline it so it can communicate whatever you're trying to communicate to the customer.
Okay, so
I mean, even internally, sometimes I'll share a Gantt chart with some people internally, like, just tell me which one's mine, and I need to get it done. I don't want to look at this, Christy. I'm like, okay.
Okay, so Excel for you, is a good communication tool, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it bridges the gap between your technical know-how or timeline or project management speak to whoever you're talking to.
Exactly. Yeah, because you can put it in a format that's really easy to edit if you don't need to show everything. Yeah, it just puts it in a good place. Or if you need to do something, I mean, like as my background's engineering, so I'm very familiar with spreadsheets and have used them for many purposes. But if you need to really quickly just analyze some data, right? Sometimes putting it in the spreadsheet format is the best way to go, because you have that flexibility to be able to do pretty much whatever you want, particularly with Excel. Excel is very powerful. It has more features than Google Sheets as far as the formulas and things that you can do with it. So
Awesome.
I think too, if you had a report you're going to run for someone who didn't have access to Salesforce, that's the way you send that out, right?
Yeah, we actually
Excel.
do that. There's one report. And like I said, we're still very new with Salesforce, and with one customer, there's a report that we just export to Excel. Now, granted, Salesforce export to Excel, it's not pretty, but it's informative. I know my boss keeps saying, "Can't you make it prettier?" I said, "Well, I can, but I'm not taking the time to do that. You're gonna have to accept the way it looks." I have to do this every week. I'm not going to take every week to make it look pretty, because I'm doing this for engineers, and I don't think they care if it's pretty or not. They just want the information.
Right.
They just
Well,
want the data, right?
Yeah.
I think I've told all of you the story where I was selling technology solutions for tech integrators, so like Cisco systems and different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so part of our sales process, and by the way, we had Salesforce, but when I actually found an opportunity, I would have to open up this Excel spreadsheet on the shared drive, and that had tons of problems, and fill it out. And each department had their own tab. So like the project manager had their tab where they would fill out everything, and then the sales engineers would fill out everything, and it was such a mess. And so like actually learning Salesforce, it's like, oh, that could have been entirely in Salesforce. It's insane that we even dealt with that, because we were always like complaining about it. But I recently heard it might have been on there's a Salesforce Admin podcast, and I think it's by some people who work for Salesforce. I forget the name of it. But they had a guest on that said, look, my goal is to take the processes that we have and either put it 100% in Salesforce or 100% out of Salesforce. And in coming from that sales background, I mean, to me, that is like a great philosophy to determine what tools to use. So like, yeah, with Excel, there are some things that should be in Excel and Excel only. But like in my situation, let's move all that into Salesforce.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's something we're still kind of on the forefront of that, of trying to figure out. And we actually even had a meeting today about sales transitions. When something's closed won, what do we do? And it was actually my supervisor. He's like, well, we need to create this form and fill out all this information. I'm like, oh, no, we are not doing that. We are not doing that. I said, right now, this is the information we need. Yes, this is a little bit manual, but since it's a little dynamic too, we're not really sure if this is the process. Let's do it this way. And eventually this is going to get built into Salesforce. When you hit close one, all this is going to pop up as to this is what you need to do in order to move forward, or it'll be automated with a flow. But we're not going to automate it quite yet, because it's still in flux as to exactly what that process looks like. But you're not going to be taking all this information out of Salesforce and putting it into some pretty table to share with everybody. They're going to have to deal. They either have to go into Salesforce and look at it, or they're just going to be in the dark.
And I keep hearing that's an important skill set, is to be able to push back and not just be like an order taker, if you will, when it comes to being an admin, like actually saying, no, like we do not want to do that, and here's why.
I'm so glad y'all are bringing this up, because that is something that I think all companies probably struggle with, because Keegan was just talking about it. It's still a thing. Like people are just comfortable, with their Excel sheets. And so sometimes they'll prefer to work in that because of the amount of control they have there and their comfort level and everything. And we have a couple of teams that we've, there's been a lot of pushback, and we have also pushed back the other way that Salesforce is our company's source of truth for all sales data, right? So anything outside of that, we have some teams that really want to use their spreadsheets. And it's like, we get that you enjoy using your spreadsheet, but then they'll ask us for things. And our pushback a lot of times is like, if you want us to build it in Salesforce, you have to use it in Salesforce. We're not going to support your use of the spreadsheets because it's too confusing to have the data in 2 different places. Like, it needs to be here. And so there's a lot of that going back and forth with a couple of teams. Most everybody is on board with Salesforce, but we have a couple of outliers where it's like they really want to do it like their way. And we try our best to accommodate and move them. Like, we'll build you something that will function in such a way that you'll like it over here. But some people are like, they're like, I really like my spreadsheet. They don't want to let it go. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure that with bridging that information too, it allows for more opportunities to just lose information outright. And then they're going to get mad at you and say, well, what did you do? And it's like, well, we didn't do anything. It's on your side for not moving to Salesforce because it has, you can make it whatever you want.
So I have a question. I mean, in our company, we don't, not everybody is in Salesforce, right? All of the customer facing are in Salesforce, and then a lot of the engineers are not. But yet they want that transparency of being able to see what is the status of what's going on. So how, what kind of tools do you use to be able to communicate, hey, here's information that's going on. Here's the status of this. What are some ways that you guys do that?
For us,
so go ahead.
Go ahead, David. I don't
I was going to say, just in our small little, I guess, manager group for the Trailhead here, we really utilize Slack right now. As a big tool, and we have one for the group. So if you're not part of it, we can definitely make that happen. And I found it to be a really awesome tool for just getting everything in one place and sending it out and saying, hey, here's what we're doing with Trailhead Group, have a discussion. Obviously we're like on Google here because we decided we like this format of this like huddle option. One problem is we can't do huddles outside a small group now because we are on a free version. So there are some issues with that. But yeah, no, I was just going to say, for communicating information, I find Slack to be a great tool right now.
And what were you going to bring up, Rosie?
So you can, I'm assuming you don't have some of the engineers and things in there due to cost.
It's mainly for the licensing costs. Maybe at some point we'll maybe create some like queues or some way that maybe at least they can log in as a group or something to see key information. But we do use Slack because we're all remote. So Slack is a big part of our business. We have not integrated Slack to sales. Well, I should say we did very early on. I tried doing that and it was a little messy, so we turned it off. But we definitely need to do that again to help at least communicate key information on Slack. So it should be easy.
How about the chatter-free licenses? Would that work out to have a chatter-free licenses where you could just use the chatter function to communicate?
I thought about that, but then I got pushed back from a lot of people. Like, we already have Slack. We don't need chatter. I'm like, all right.
I think part of it comes down to who is it that's asking for the information and what type of information that they're asking for, because that's going to change. And Christine, you kind of alluded to this already, is there's certain groups of people who are going to want to receive that information one way, and there's some information that we have that's going to work well in certain areas. So I remember telling you guys about basically rebuilding reports and emails to be sent out, but when you start getting a lot of data, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to do that. And so it's almost like its own equation of who am I talking to the data. And I think that we have a lot of good options. Like David talked about Slack. Mark brought up Chatter. And then there's other forms.
I think the idea of emailing, having like a daily email of a Salesforce report is, like you were saying, Keegan, is a thing. If all they're looking for is some baseline data, like here are where we are on these couple of things, you can, set up an email alert and just have it, email whoever with that PDF or whatever each day or each week. That's a way to do it too. And if the licenses don't become a huge issue, you can always set up, profiles based on what they need to have access to. I'm trying to think if the Salesforce.com one would let them have access to a lot. Probably not. But yeah, the email might be a good option too. It's a good point.
Well, it's easy for all of us. And I'm going to say, again, from the sales background, I'm going to be my own harshest critic. We salespeople, my most hated phrase in the English language is "we've always done it this way."
Oh my gosh, yes.
And salespeople are the number one group that use that phrase, so it drives me up the wall. But again, it comes back to what does each group, what each silo, like what do they need, and what's that least path of resistance for them? And sometimes we kind of have to figure that out, because there's no way we're going to get the salespeople to start thinking like, and there's going to be engineers. We're not going to be able to get them to think like us, or project managers. So it goes back to like, how can we bring everyone together?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not a one size fits all, basically, what you're saying. You have to figure out,
Yeah, exactly.
Who needs what information, and make sure it's in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
And another thing I recently read was, I guess a soft skill that we'd like to have is interpreting what a user is telling you. So they say, I need this, but instead of I need this, it's, okay, what are you going to do with it? And exactly what information are you trying to get, and what are you trying to do? But I think if you just went and built something like a new field or whatever, you might have could have accomplished it with a different method if you were able to decipher what they're really looking for. Is that a soft skill that you think would be important?
I think absolutely. I think it's an iterative process too. That's one thing as we were, like I said, I'm still very new to Salesforce, but we actually were working with a Salesforce consultant to help us get set up. We were both set up as admins, and so she's obviously a lot more experienced than me, but I've learned a lot along the way. But the one thing, that I actually pushed back on her on was, I said, look, we need to get everybody in there and using it, so we understand how they're using it, and then we can kind of clean it up and rejigger things to the way what they really need. We've got this preliminary setup, and I know it's not perfect, but until we force everybody in there to actually use it, we're not going to know what they really need.
I guess that's why you hear so much about user adoption, is the fact that what you're describing there.
Yep. I was in one sales meeting and I had to get off. I'm like, I have something else to do, because they were doing everything in a spreadsheet, and I was like, this isn't Salesforce. What the hell are you doing? I think I calmly said that in the meeting. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about, Christine. And I'm like, okay, I have something else I need to do. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave this meeting now before I explode.
Love that assertiveness.
But luckily, I had a salesperson who was like, don't worry, Christine, we'll get them in Salesforce. I said, thank you. I said, I'm your admin. You let me know what you need me to do in order to, fix things so they will get in there. He's like, I will.
Right.
Well, so somebody at your company is paying for Salesforce, and Salesforce is not cheap, right? Okay, so that person, whoever it is, has to be like your champion, who's kind of pushing it from the top down a lot of the time. Just because, like you said, a lot of times people just don't want to change off of what they were doing, because that's just comfort level. And if you have complaints like, oh, it doesn't do this or whatever, then you're like, well, we can address that, so.
Well, I was going to say, what you just mentioned about like how they don't want to do it because it's not what they know, and in your situation, Salesforce is not
Spreadsheets are
cheap.
simpler. They're doing it in a spreadsheet. Just have to say that.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't agree with that. But I was going to say, working with a nonprofit or through Salesforce, church I attend, we have Salesforce for like budgeting and keeping track of that kind of stuff. So basically, it's all spreadsheet information. I've done some work. Tony is actually part of the other half that was that we happened to attend the same church, and that's how I got into knowing what Salesforce is. And so I've learned a lot going through that. What frustrates me now that I know what Salesforce is that we have this free org because it's a church and up to 10 people, and all the administration can be plugged into Salesforce. But people, they hear Salesforce, they're like, we're a church, we're not about sales. And it's like, it's not about sales. It's CRM. We have all our members. They're all part of it. And so there's a system called Breeze, which you also get, but we have to pay a subscription for it. I'm like, we could build this whole member tracking info Rolodex for free and make an app in Salesforce and just put everybody on it, and they have access to it. Even if they're not part of the 10 administrators, on the free version. And it just it goes back to the, well, not everybody be comfortable with that. And I don't know, I don't like it. This is what we've always done, and it's like, shoot me. Yeah, so that's a struggle. Just in my experience, setting it up, we use Salesforce for one function only, but we could be using it for all these functions. It just makes life so much simpler, and also save money for the church. Because we're paying a subscription for something that people kind of use on a so-so basis. Like, they want to mail a card to somebody, they'll go in there and look up another member. Other than that, I mean, there's not really getting utilized. So we're paying this yearly subscription. It's like, is it worth it? Not
Well,
really.
I think that goes back to how customizable Salesforce is. And there are other things than just managing membership lists, potentially tithing, things like that, is you have the flexibility of creating an all-encompassing app. And that can, again, move people completely out of Salesforce. Like the people who don't want to be a part of Salesforce, you can put up a web portal, web form for them to quickly enter something. And to them, it's not Salesforce. To them, they're putting in a form that says, I need prayer for this, or I'm going through a hard, difficult time, and I would like you to pray for this, or I might actually need financial help. And that can be routed, tracked. There's so much that you can do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like they somehow don't trust that it's secure because it's free to them, and it's like, no, it's probably more secure than anything else we're using, so yeah, it's a matter of convincing people. And what's really been useful is when we do our business meetings where we have to review budget, they see this whole spreadsheet layout and they're like, wow, this is so, I know a spreadsheet sucks, but when you see it, it's like the clearest spreadsheet you've ever seen. They're like, boy, how'd you get this so nice? Salesforce. Another one I was wondering that goes back to my personal experience is Zapier. Utilize any kind of forms of Zapier for multi-functionality train apps? No, I guess it goes to like running live stream stuff, and you want it to post. So like if you're streaming a message, for example, you can have it go out on. So Zapier sets you up that you can plug in like your Facebook and your YouTube and your Instagram, all these things, and it links them all together through Zapier. So when you're ready to hit go, hit stream, it automatically goes bing, bing, bing across the board and says, hey, Dave is streaming on all these platforms. Wherever you see me, you go to what it gives you a little alert. You go there and you follow it. So I really like Zapier for that, because instead of trying to run, like you have your tabs open. It's like, okay, launch here, launch here, launch here. It does it all from one set, platform.
It's interesting that you brought that up because, with Salesforce, it's the go-to for enterprises. And MuleSoft is basically the enterprise version of Zapier. But at the same time, Salesforce is still compatible with Zapier. If you're not ready to hook up or utilize the features and benefits of MuleSoft, I mean, it still has that flexibility. So that's one of the things I love about Salesforce.
Yeah, I'll have to look more into MuleSoft. I know I've heard it a dozen different times, but I really don't know anything about MuleSoft other than Salesforce owns it. And the Muleys is what they call themselves as their MuleSoft people.
Rosie, I see you like thinking. Am I like off on that analogy? Like, please let me know.
I honestly don't really have any any comment on that. So I believe you.
I'm going to put this on the internet, and there will probably be like a ton of people that'll comment and be like, "Oh no, you're completely wrong."
I think it's used
I don't have a whole lot of
mainly for what integrating your different systems or orgs together with your APIs. I guess it makes things play nice together. What I've been able to read.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and that sounds very Zapier. It's just it's the Salesforce version of it. So yeah, I'll have to bug my cohort and say, hey, why are you using Zapier when there's MuleSoft? I'll probably get a dirty look from them.
Well, I don't think that you necessarily have to go with one or the other. Just go with the one that works and that works for you and your organization. I mean, the nice thing about Salesforce and why it's so prolific is because of the integrations. I mean, that's one of the reasons. But I mean, it's been a while. It's been around for a while. It has a ton of support, a ton of community, and a ton of integrations.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to throw this one out there. Here's one that I use often. YouTube. I know it's simple, but that is honestly my go-to for like when I'm having to do something I'm not familiar with. I go YouTube. Actually, I go to Google, and a lot of times one of the first results is a YouTube video. So
I totally agree. For
just
everything, not even Salesforce, but Salesforce related, I try to go there, and other tasks in life too. That's my go-to as well. First place to look.
I've used YouTube for trailheads to filling out my vehicle. So yeah, definitely. YouTube is big.
What's scary?
My secret to seeming smart is I've completely outsourced my brain to Google and YouTube.
The hard part though is finding, particularly for Salesforce, at least what I found is finding YouTube videos that are relevant for today. If it's more than a year old, it's out of date and not even useful.
You are so on point with that, because last virtual we ran Bevy, and Bevy is the one that's integrated with what's the system called? It's all Bevy. It's all running. So when you see like the RSVP ticket system, that's Bevy. And so some of it is like, okay, this makes sense. So you fill it all out. When it came time to do the chat here, I went looked for something. I was talking to Keegan about it, and he was going to host and MC, and I was like, I found one video. It's like from 4 years ago, and the lady talks about everything but Bevy in the last 5 minutes. And that's another YouTube thing that you get you, like they see with the information in the title, like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And then you watch and you're afraid to skip ahead because you're like, or you do skip ahead and they're talking about that. Now I got to skip back. And that is one fault with YouTube. Other than
no, what I hate most about YouTube is when everyone's like, okay, I'm going to show you how to do this, this, and this. But I'm going to tell you what led me to look into this first. Here's my backstory, and 10 minutes later, I finally get to the answer. Like that's what drives me crazy.
That's for ad
Yeah,
purposes, by the way, because then if you're over a certain number of minutes, they can stick like mid-roll ads in there, and it's worth more. So, yeah.
I come from a little bit of a sales marketing background, and I've learned anytime you try gaming Google, which YouTube is part of Google, you're going to eventually lose because they continually look out for how people game the system. And so there's coming a day where people are going to be like, I shouldn't tell my life story. And I'm looking forward to that day.
Well,
And another good place to go that you might be scared to go is the Trailhead community, like forums. Like just there has been, since I've started, I haven't used it much. There's been a couple times where I was really stuck on something, and I was like, man, I am super stuck on this. And I posted, and people are super nice. Will come out of you might not get a ton of responses, but the ones you get are usually quality responses. People are really like genuine and try to help you out, and a lot of like. It solved my problem. Like I was like, I never thought to do it that way. That's so smart. So I think it's worth going there too if you ever get really stuck on a problem.
That is the one great thing about this community is it seems like most people are so willing to help and keep you moving and provide answers. What about
and what's cool?
Gear set? Any experience with that, Rosie?
Gear set costs money. It's an app that you can download off of App Exchange, but it's a whole thing. But it's our parent company uses Gear set in their org. I believe we don't, but yes, it's great, especially if you have a larger team, because there's a lot you can do with deployments. So like your deployment pipeline, like you're getting stuff from your sandboxes into your production org and working together with multiple people trying to make all these changes simultaneously without like writing over each other and everything as you're working, especially if you have developers working on Apex and then admins doing other things and they're all trying to like merge it together. Gear set's good for that. It's got a lot.
So you're able to see the bigger picture if you're going to do a deployment as a change sets.
Yeah, so change sets are like the way, like the standard issue way for admins to move things from sandboxes into production. And I remember that was the one thing where I'm like, I have no experience with this because as someone who's had not worked in, a real like legit org, you didn't have the option of using the sandbox yet. So that was something I learned, but it wasn't too bad. The problem with change sets is they're very time consuming. And then if you use more than one, so for example, like we have a dev sandbox and then we have a user acceptance testing sandbox that actually has like some sample data in it for people. So like if there's something I want to be like, hey, we built this thing, I want you to test it before we push it into production, I'll have them log in there and try it out and validate it with me before they move into production with it. But every time you move, like whatever your components, like this custom field, this validation rule, like all those things have to be added to a change set, and you cannot like clone it. So like if you have an inbound change set, like that's the change set that's moving into the org, you have to make a new one, an outbound change set that goes to the next org, and you have to compile all those little pieces again. So for me, I like to use smaller change sets and just push them rather than like having this big one that you move, because that would be a lot. But if you're working in an org that's got a lot of people and you're moving stuff relatively quickly, I could see how that would get pretty impossible after a while. So
yeah, the little bit change that I worked with in the nonprofit org, very tedious components. I remember Tony made me go and do the mods on Trailhead for change sets, and I was like, "This is gonna suck." And then we went in, did sandboxes, and did all those pieces. And he actually did exactly what you said, where he's like, okay, we're going to demonstrate a big one, and we're going to demonstrate smaller ones. And you're going to tell me which one you like better for applications. And I'm like, why are you punishing me? This is terrible.
Yeah, it is the way that I would think most admins are probably moving things, especially in smaller organizations, or if you're like a solo admin or whatever, and you're not running into other people doing things all the time. It makes sense to do it that way. It's just time consuming. But the new DevOps Center that Salesforce introduced is going to do some of that. We're actively like exploring it and seeing if it's a good option for us or not. But that I think their Salesforce is moving admins towards a more like what I would call like software, like development mindset as far as like how deployments work, or they're trying to anyway. So, but Gear Set, yes.
So we're,
and then I'm trying to think what else they do. Data backup, I think sometimes Gear Set is involved with that as well. They have a big suite of things, so I think it depends on what you pay for and add-ons and all that fun stuff.
so we are coming up on 7:30, and I'm going to keep going. So I have unlimited time, but I know not everyone has unlimited time. Actually, that's not fair to say because my wife is watching our baby right now. If she heard me, she'd be like, "What?" But yeah, I do have this question: is especially for like Christine and Rosie, is there a tool that you wish existed that you haven't found yet? I mean, like what are some of the weird, unique challenges that you think something could help with? And I'm just throwing that on you, so obviously you probably have to think.
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I'm still very new. I actually created my first flow today. That's how new I am.
Oh, that's awesome.
It didn't work very well, but that's okay.
That's one more flow that I've created, so there you go.
What'd you think about creating your flow?
I mean, I think like with any other, object related, programming like that it just takes practice, really. We're just getting ready to launch using cases for customer support. So a lot of it was just trying to understand, what are the different ways we can notify people, when certain conditions occur in a case. And cases are kind of weird because it does still use some of the workflows that are still active for that. So you can easily send multiple. That's what I learned is I created a flow, but depending on how you create a flow, you may be sending somebody 2 emails. Just because it's still native, there's still that native, notifications within cases that will anyway. But it was educational, right? I mean, I learned something about, how at least got a taste of how the flows work, and we'll learn from there. But yeah, we're just getting ready to, actually, we're going to meet with the team tomorrow to do some user acceptance testing, all we built out in cases. So.
Yep. One of the things I'm thankful for.
I'm going to leave notifications.
I'm sorry. What was that?
I was going we're leaving the notifications that we're a small enough org that it doesn't really matter. It's just more of planning. It's like, I don't want to have to, manually tell people or, mention them in the chatter that, hey, this is for you, be much easier if it just automatically tells them. And in some cases you can do that. So, but anyway, I think it's going to be, multiple ways until we figure out a good method of letting people know they have new work to work on.
Yeah, I think the one thing that saved me with flows is I took a couple years of computer science in high school, and that was all about, C++ at the time. I think now they're on to Java, but even though I'm not a C++ programmer, it really helped change the way I thought. I mean, it gave me that skill set of thinking logically. I think that's something that has been so helpful, is that, with so many things in Salesforce, there's like 5 to 10 different ways of, coming to the solution. And, having that background, coming up with the best solution, that's what's been really beneficial for me, especially when it comes to working with flows.
Oh, yes. Christine, can I ask what edition you guys are on your Salesforce org, like professional or enterprise or
Enterprise. We're on enterprise.
okay. Because depending on your subscription, you can be limited on the number of flows you can have. And so that might change how you build them, right? Because you might have a flow that has to do a lot in a single flow versus being able to create a bunch of, smaller ones. So
I got you. Okay.
I was just curious which one you were using. I think enterprise. I'm trying to remember. I think enterprise has got, I don't think you're really limited as much there. But some of the others, the ones for like the lower level,
Yeah, that makes sense.
businesses are limited to like five flows. So that's not a lot.
Okay, Rosie, hold up. Okay, so in the chat you put C++ is definitely still a thing. You come from a background in teaching.
Yes.
You've just started in Salesforce. How do you know that?
Oh, my husband.
Okay.
My husband, yes.
It's
Not
actually
me personally, but it's definitely still a thing. And I've always been around techie people in my life. So like some of our friends and stuff are in like game programming, for example, and C++ is definitely still a thing for them. So yeah.
That's kind of cool to know. I mean, I just remember the last time I heard someone at my old high school talking about their computer science program. It's Java++ because mobile apps are such a huge thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's so many languages now, but
Yeah.
I feel like C drives still like the back end of most things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I basically work for a software company, and it's funny because some of the, and I'll put this in air quotes, some of the older programmers that are in their 30s, they joke about using C# or C++, and then, most of our software engineers are barely 20 years old, and they're like, what are you talking about? Python's the way to go, or doing this or doing that. And I'm like, I'll just leave that argument to you guys. I don't care. Just get it done. But it's just funny to see, I mean, I'm back in the day when I was in college, I took Pascal. That is definitely not a thing anymore.
Yeah,
It wasn't even object oriented, was it?
No. No. I'm a little older, I think, than you are. This is back in the early 90s. So object-oriented programming was not a thing back then.
I was on the tail end. We're not too far apart.
no, I was gonna say the same thing. I have a buddy who works for a game development company based in Columbus, Ohio, and I've had conversations with him about the programming languages that he uses for his job. And it's exactly that. Like if they're doing desktop-based things, C++ is the base that they start with. And then they get hired to do a mobile app or game development, they start with Java. And they go from there. He says it's really difficult when you try to cross certain things sometimes because you almost come up with little in-house combo languages where you're trying to get to talk to each other. And, so he really, I've known him since childhood, and it's like his passion. He's always wanted to be a game developer, and it's really cool to see him talk about that kind of stuff because you get to a certain point. I'm like, okay, it's no more English. I don't know what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, are we?
I'll go ahead, Mark.
No, you go ahead, David.
I was going to say tools for networking. I will say that LinkedIn has become a very big part of my life here in the last couple months for that. I've had LinkedIn for several years now, and it was just the thing was kind of there, and I'm kind of like, yeah, that's weird. This was Facebook, And I had like 4 people that I knew that were not at all in related fields. Now that I'm working at the trail at Salesforce, I've grown like a couple hundred network connections, and I found it really insightful just to see where people are at. They're sharing their story. They're talking about tools they're using. They're Talent Stacker versus other programs. I had one that I loved it, and just like getting your certs and badges and all these kinds of things, and like you got to weed through some of it, but I really have just enjoyed how it something inspires you. You're feeling down. You're like, this is just not it. I'm hitting a wall. And you go to somebody, like Mark, like, hey, I passed this, my other cert, this kind of thing. You're like, okay, I got a little share off a little bit of that energy, So I've really enjoyed. It's become pretty much one of my daily check-ins just to kind of see what's going on with other people and what tools they're using that might benefit me, and just where they're at, and catching down the line is, someone over here works in this industry and with Salesforce-oriented things, they might have an insight into something that you could go ask them for the future. I just think that's really, really cool to see that LinkedIn is a lot more than I thought it was just a few short months ago. It's not just weird as a Facebook.
Yeah. So
You mentioned Talent Stacker in there, David, and there's some of the free podcasts and videos that they offer there. And one of them that I remember watching early on was about setting up your LinkedIn page and making it scream Salesforce, if that's a career you're looking to get into. And so I went in and tried to revamp mine so that even though I have 25 years of experience as a customer service manager, that's not what I'm looking for now. I want a Salesforce role. So I'm all about Salesforce with a passion for customer service, so it's
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. Like, build on your strengths, your existing strengths.
Agreed.
So for me, I'm really passionate about social media, especially LinkedIn. It is a social media platform. So the best way that you can get your name out there isn't just with your profile. I mean, yes, optimize your profile. Make sure that you're saying the right things on it. Make it look good. But the best thing that you can do is go out and be social with others. And there are ways to do that. I mean, like with a lot of you guys here, I actually reached out with like a cold email. And normally I hate getting a cold email or cold connection request because they're always like, hey, I want to talk to you about your CRM, and how we can optimize it. I know that's a sales pitch. I don't want to talk to you. But for a lot of you guys, I was just reaching out and saying, hey, like, this is something that I want to be involved with, starting a Salesforce group. And a lot of people were receptive with it because it was obviously not a sales pitch. It was something where I truly want to connect with other people. And at the end of the day, any social media platform, whether it's Twitter, it's all about making genuine connections. I've seen a lot of success from that. If you go into it actually wanting to connect with someone and actually hearing their story and interact with them, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I do enjoy your posts that you put on there frequently, Keegan. I watch for those daily, so keep them coming.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, well, I think things are kind of winding down. Does anyone else have anything else they wanted to share or talk about before we adjourn?
No.
Yeah. Well, we'll be.
I'll just say I really appreciate all of you
soon.
guys. I mean, Christine, it's great that you're here. Rosie and David and Mark. I mean, like, and I want to also mention Tony, even though he's not here on the call. I mean, like, again, it goes back to community. And I mean, I really just enjoy talking with you guys and having that relationship with you. So that's what will make or break this.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that we're able to join tonight. And like Keegan mentioned, Tony's been a big part of Keegan and I in getting the group going. And it's been such a joy to see people come on and be part of it and give to it. And yeah, it's really exciting what future holds for Salesforce. And I was going to say, Mark, you talked about making your LinkedIn stream Salesforce. I also read my line, say, I'll be not certified for Salesforce Admin. Here's what I'm working on. Here's some of my educational background, and other than just, I'm a truck driver, because that conjures up all sorts of images, some people, and actually, I evidently did a good enough job that my brother-in-law in Ohio reached out to me and said, "Did you change career?" And I said, "Not yet." Well,
I've been asked that question too. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to be putting together some ideas for our next meeting. The next one will be virtual. The next one will be in person, right, David?
Yeah. And this one is our quarterly in person, and we're going to get some details out on that. Figure out some topics. Anybody our way, feel free to send them. Any of us can take that message and apply it.
Well, and depending on what that topic is, I mean, we might be able to reach out to someone and get their expertise. I've recently
and have a presenter possibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't want this to be 100% on getting certifications or like getting your first Salesforce job. I really like the idea of us like helping each other regardless of what point we are in our career. But on LinkedIn, I recently met someone who like their big stick is being able to get like 20 certifications within like 8 months. It's something ridiculous like that. So, I'm just saying there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of people we can reach out to. So the sky's the limit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm mainly here to learn. Maybe I'll get a Salesforce certification someday, but it's not my goal. It's really just to learn more about Salesforce and doing it right so that I can serve my company better.
I reached where Tony was on because he would love to hear that, because his background is that he was in Salesforce for like 8 years prior to getting his job with Salesforce, and then when he got into Salesforce, they said, "Hey, we need you to go do some certification." He's like, "Huh?" Yeah.
No, I spent most of my career as an engineer, and then got this job as a project manager, and they're like, "Let's use Salesforce for our CRM." I'm like, "Okay, let me figure it out." Now,
yeah.
so